The Enterprise has an unscheduled escort. Kern must go to the Memphis sector, and Guinan is willing to come down to level 14 for Worf. Hello, everybody, and welcome to The Seventh Rule with Cirroc Lofton.
Hello.
My name is Ryan T. Husk, and today we are doing a review of Star Trek The Next Generation. Heard of it? Season 4, Episode 26, entitled Redemption. This was written by Ronald D. Moore, directed by Cliff Bole. This was June 15th, 1991. Where were you? We also have a very special guest today, everybody. You are not going to believe this. Gowron himself, Robert O'Reilly, is here. How are you today, Robert?
I'm good.
Also, very quickly, we want to give a very special thanks to Stephen Green and Sean Mouch for sponsoring this episode. Thank you so much, Stephen Green and Sean Mouch. This is for you. All right, let's get into it.
Yeah.
That was good Gowron stuff you gave us right there.
Yeah. Well, I'll do it without the glasses. I'll do it again. Here we go.
There it is. You did a fantastic job in this episode. I mean, I couldn't peel away from it. It was one of those things where you have to I have to pause it because even though I'm going to walk over here and grab a water real quick, I can't let it ride for that 30 seconds. I need to watch every second of this thing. And that's because you were captivating, riveting, the whole story. I mean, Ronald Moore. What do you remember about this episode?
Well, it was it was a fabulous episode. It was a two-part, and it was just, and the actors in it, there was a myriad of brilliant actors, and I think the best of the Klingons were there. You hear that, G. Hertzler? Anyway, Tony Todd and Barbara and Gwyneth, Barbara Marsh and Gwyneth Walsh, and it was just a fabulous cast, and it was an exciting show to do because it was a two-parter, and I enjoyed the hell out of it. And the storyline was just, Moore's writing in it was just fabulous. So I had a great time. The memories of it was, one of my favorite lines was I think Turok says, someday the Duras family will rule the empire. And I say, perhaps, but not today.
Yes.
And it's one of my favorites. The writing in it so good. It was just great. It was fun. It was a fun show to do in a lot of ways. And hellish too, because we had to be in makeup and wardrobe for so long, all the hours we had board. And Tony Todd was an amazing actor and just brilliant. I always thought he was the very best of the Klingons. I love to watch him.
You touched on a few things here, but the first thing I want to jump on was the writing. Okay, so obviously this was brilliantly written, so good. Ronald D. Moore really knows what he's doing, always shows that. When you first read this script, I don't know if you can remember back that first feeling when you read this, were your eyes getting big, just like not in character, but just at how great this was, or were you thinking like this is a really juicy role? Do you remember any of that?
Well, yeah. When I first got it, I went, "Oh, Gowron's going to be here for a while," because he didn't die at the end of the. Well, actually, I get one set, and then you get the other one. You don't get both of them right away. So I was curious, to see if I lived through it, and then I did find out I did live through it, and I knew I'd be around for probably a couple of years, couple of seasons anyway. So Michael Westmore, when I was first becoming a Klingon in the very first show I was in, I think it was, anyway, whatever it was, he said, "Oh, Bob, it's going to be a life thing." I said, "What are you talking about? I'm doing a guest star on Star Trek." And he said, "No, it's going to be a little more than that." And then the words came to me, what he was saying, because apparently he knew, some people knew that my character was going to go on and on and on. And those words came to me when I've read the first script, the first Redemption, and I went, wow. I mean, it's fun for an actor to find out you're going to be around for a while. So, because I was a guest star actor, I was going from show to show for years. And a lot of times I would be in a number of shows during a season, but I knew I'd always die at the end. And true to form, even in Star Trek, I died at the end.
Right.
After 2 shows, many shows, but 2 different shows. It's, the joke of the Klingons. When are we going to die?
With honor, of course, though.
Yeah, with honor.
Yeah. Well, this episode taps into one of the things that I think Star Trek is one of the appealing things for me about Star Trek, and that is the diplomacy aspect and the going deeper, in-depth dive into another alien's, governance and world affairs. And so I think watching the Klingon story for me it's so interesting to see how Worf is on a quest to get his restoration of his family name, how you are on a quest, your character's on a quest to gain power. And it looks like be a good steward of the power for the Klingon, which is, what we're always looking for is leadership that is going to have the best interests of the people in mind. And so I think that's one of the things we're trying to decipher about Galron as we watch him, how trustworthy is he, Yeah. I love the way you act opposite Patrick Stewart. You really hold your gaze on him. You really don't, turn your eyes down away from him. You look him dead in the eye. You give him the entire intensity. And I think that also allows him to bring his performance up as well. So I want to give you kudos for that.
It was really fun watching, acting with Patrick. We really enjoyed each other. It was like we were on the same wavelength. Somehow, sometimes you're a little bit off with the other actor, but with Patrick, I was just like zapped on, and I felt he was too. So we really, really enjoyed each other.
You could see the chemistry. It was locked in, those scenes in his captain's quarters where you're looking at him and you're asking to see where his allegiance is, and he's trying to find out where your allegiance is, and the whole gamesmanship, the whole chess play. It's beautiful to watch.
Yeah, it was fun working with him. It was the writing is so good in that show. I was truly amazed by both of them, and we had a star cast in that. I mean, we had Whoopi in it, and I mean, I didn't work with her, but she was in it, and Denise Crosby was in it, and it was almost like doing a film. It was great, and the cinematographer. There are moments in that show that the cinematography came out. When they ride at the end of it, I think it was maybe it was Redemption, the second one, where he camera rises up, and those shots are usually just done in films. I mean, that's an expensive shot because of the crane that you have to use. Stuff like that was just like brilliant.
There were very good choices by Cliff Bole in this episode. I like the close up on the dagger that panned up to your face, and where Worf grabs the tip of the blade of the dagger. I thought that was a great shot. It showed the roof of the ceiling. You don't get to see much ceiling action when you're looking at these sets, but it was just great. One of my favorite lines that you delivered was, "Where did you find him? In a harlot's chamber?" And you had so much fun delivering that line. It looked like you were like, "Oh, I'm gonna get this kid," with this Raz right here. And I thought it landed so well.
Moore gave me so much humor lines that you didn't have to. You could play it heavy, but I was looking for a lot of humor in adding something on Empire, because I always felt that everybody was too one note as Klingons, you know, and I always felt that, you know, because we're hard drinking, partying group. So, so you have to have some fun doing that. So I was always looking for that, you know, those lines, and he had them there for me.
And you do that. You mentioned that, but you do that more so than any other Klingon portrayal.
Yes,
you know, when you see, for example, Tony Todd in his rendition, he doesn't really add that much humor in his. It's all straight up, and so is War. You know, it's all straight up. Yeah. But you do, like, you'll deliver a punchline in a Klingon way. Like, isn't that funny? And it's like, yeah, that is funny.
You know, there's another line. There's another line you said, Bob, that kind of got me there, and it was just a 2-word line. It was impudent wretch, and that could have been delivered so many ways. It could have been delivered angrily, right? But you had the anger simmering below, and you had the vibe of somebody that is looking at an impudent wretch, and you said it with like a smiling sneer, which was such a great choice. Do you remember if you took a few different takes of that, or if you knew when you read that line, this is how I want to deliver it?
You know, there were times where they would let me do that. I forget if that was one of them. But if it's usually in a scene, they won't do it. They won't take it out. But I have come up to a couple of end lines, and I'll say, you know, can I do it a couple of different ways? And most directors, unless time is running out, and that's the thing that used to drive me crazy. You know, when they're going to pull the plug at 2 a.m., you know, and you got a scene that you could do one way or the other, and you want to try to do it so they have a choice, because it's all their choice anyway. And I remember one time, the very last thing I did on Star Trek, I wanted to do the very last line before I died on the very last show I did in Deep Space, and the poor director said, "Bob, we can't. They're pulling the plug in 5 minutes."
You're like, after all these years, I've dedicated to this.
Getting stabbed over and over again, you know.
Wow. You mentioned Barbara Marsh and Gwyneth Walsh, and I wanted to ask you a little bit about them. I thought they delivered a great performance. We've seen them throughout these years as the Duras sisters. And I haven't gotten a chance to talk with them directly about their experience, but can you tell us a little bit about working with them and, you know, what they were like as actors?
They were fabulous. I mean, they were so much fun too. I mean, the scene that I adore. I mean, I just adore the scene where they've taken Patrick and kidnapped Patrick, and Gwyneth takes her fingernails and does it over his head, scratches over his head, taunting. Yes. I mean, where did she come up with that? I mean, it was just brilliant, because
it was so brilliant.
She just did it, and the director was smart enough to just leave her alone, you know, and then use a close up, you know, to capture it. It was just brilliant, and Barbara's brilliant too. I mean, Barbara's, you know, she passed away many years ago, but she is such an incredible stage actress for many, many years, and just a brilliant actress. But the two of them together were hilarious. Just a side note story. We got along great, and we worked together great, and had a lot of fun together on the set. And then they emailed me, you know, and they said, Bob, we got the film. We got the next film. We're going to be in the next film. And I wrote back to them. I said, "Oh, I'm so sorry." And they went, "What? Why would you be sorry?" And I said, "Because they're going to kill you off. You're a Klingon."
That's it.
In the films, they never survive. But we had a lot of fun on the road together, because we did a lot of conventions also after that. Because they were just incredible actresses together. You know, they were just anyway.
Their chemistry was amazing. I love that scene as well, where she rubs that fingernail over the top of his head, and her sister's like, "Hey, like, slow it down. Like, don't give it away yet. There'll be time for that later."
Yeah, right.
I want to ask you though, because this was the last episode of the 4th season, and I imagine that it's the 2-parter, so they're bringing you back for the beginning of the 5th season. So was this a break in between? Were you filming this at the last end of this 4th season and then waiting the hiatus to be brought back for the 2nd part?
You know, I think that's the way it went. Although I don't really remember, because I was doing so many Star Trek things at that time, because I was doing the CD about the same time. And I think what happened was I did Redemption 1, and then I did the CD, which was 3 weeks of me doing every scene in makeup all day long. And
in makeup?
In makeup.
For a CD?
For a CD?
For a CD. Yeah.
Wow.
Is it an audio thing?
Rude.
Why did they need you the visual for the audio?
It was not. Well, anyway, it was a film.
Okay.
Maybe it was like CD-ROM or something back then in the 90s.
Okay, yes.
And Frakes directed it, and then
Frakes directed it.
Yeah, and then I went right into the Redemption 2. I think that's the way it happened. I might have it wrong, but I'm pretty sure that's the way it happened. It was 91 or 92, and so I was like burnt. I was like burnt like a toast. I was just, because I had been in makeup, Klingon makeup. You know what it's like, for the. And I had so I in it straight for 6 weeks, and my
God,
deteriorating, and I didn't get much break. When you do Redemption 1 or in Redemption 2, you had days you had off, which was great. You would shoot 16 hours, but usually the next day you'd have off. But the CD-ROM, I had no days off, and just so it was. So I think that's what happened. But I wondered the whole time until I got the script, whether I would be killed,
I wonder if it was possibly you're credited as doing the Star Trek: The Next Generation interactive board game. So maybe it was something like that where you were doing clips of you as a Klingon and things like that. And I think I may have had that board game, honestly.
The board game was different. That was directed by anyway, but I was the only one in the board game. So
directed by Les Landau, of course.
Yeah, it wasn't Gowron. It was Les Landau did it, and it was Les and me on the Star Trek set. We were the only actors on it. I mean, I was the only actor on it, and Kavak, and who comes up to want to meet me was probably now I forget his name, but the great scientist of all time, not Einstein, but he was playing
Tesla.
Huh?
Tesla?
No, he was playing. He was playing in a card game next door.
Oh yeah, Stephen Hawking, maybe.
Yes, Stephen Hawking, and he was the big Klingon fan, and he wanted to meet a Klingon, and Worf wasn't around. So they asked if he could come on the set, but they didn't tell me who it was. And so he came on the set, and he just wanted. All I knew is that he wanted to meet me, somebody from the other set. And he came on, and as soon as he spoke, I knew who it was because he spoke through a machine.
Mm-hmm.
And so anyway, that's side story of that.
To this day, Stephen Hawking is the only person in Star Trek history, I believe, that has played himself. He was in an episode of Star Trek playing himself. He's the only one that's ever done that, which is a pretty awesome honor.
Yeah, here I've got. Now they didn't have a photography. He wanted a photographer a photograph with me and a Klingon, and the only thing was the wardrobe guy had it. So here's the picture. I don't know if you can see it.
Oh wow, yeah.
I just happen to have it.
Wow.
Wow.
But it's Kavak, and he's on the bottom, and his nurse is on the top with me.
Wow.
So I just happen to have it here, just, but that was the only camera they had on set, was the Polaroid. So they used that. Interesting.
Wow.
That's so cool that you ended up with one of those.
Memory. Yeah.
Because I mean, that you can't copy those. You know what I mean? That's a Polaroid. That's awesome. Wow.
Yeah, it was. I call it the mathematical genius of the world with the mathematical idiot of the world.
And the polar opposite.
I was never very good at,
Oh wow! So let me ask you. So this Deep Space Nine is about to come on. I think when around the sixth season of Next Generation. So when is the first time you hear rumblings of another series coming up?
You mean Deep Space Nine?
Yeah,
we heard it starting probably about 2 years before, but a lot of people went, no, it's probably not going to happen. It was, rumor mill, rumor monger, and then when I heard about it, we were in Germany. We were doing one of Dirk's shows, FedCon, and we heard the cast. Now Majel was with us, and so Majel. No, we weren't. It wasn't a Dirk's convention. It was a different convention. But anyway, Majel was with us, and she must have known much earlier than that, because she was, she was, married to the man, Gene, and so she just kept quiet, but she was like, yeah, and then she named us the cast because she knew the cast. So, and some of the actors and some of us didn't know the actors, but that was a big deal, and it was a lot of fun learning that and knowing who was in the cast too. That was fun. Also,
any mention at that time that the Klingons would be also integrated in the storyline?
No, that came later. And then all of a sudden, when they said Worf was moving over, I was just like, I was grinning from ear to ear, because I knew, if he was moving over, I was moving over.
Yeah,
I felt it, knew it. And by golly, it happened, and it was like, to get 2 series in a row for me was, wonderful. It was, so it was great. It was,
and it's such a big and storied franchise that just keeps on giving forever. Yeah. And we only have you for a few more minutes, Robert, but I wanted to ask you, and we kind of talked about this a little bit, but what I was noticing when I'm watching this episode is that you really brought an extra dimension to your character that really is almost non-existent in other Klingons, right? We know Worf, how he is. He's very put in a box. Now, there's a ton of nuance added to that, but we know what Worf acts like. And we have even Gowron. We understand what he's like. Kern, very serious.
Right.
And the thing is, with your character, people can't really put you in a box as like, this is the serious Klingon, or this is the jovial Klingon, or this is the jerk, or you know what I mean? Like, was there a certain intentionality to that, or is that just something you brought to all of your characters? Did you feel he was written in a way that's a little more freeing than how they write most Klingons?
Well, I think the writers kind of picked up on my use of humor, what I call humor, and kind of the, looking at somebody and trying to look through them, but also giving a sense of irony. The very first thing I ever did as a Klingon, I was standing next. It's a shot that nobody really remembers, but I remember it. It's like we're lined up, and I'm next to Patrick, and I just say one word to him, and I look at him and go, human, like most disdainful way anybody say anything about anybody is human, and I think sort of that brought into kind of what I was, and then Jonathan Frakes really encouraged me to make choices that just went all the way. He said it with, use your eyes all the time. In the very first show, and that established Gowron as going really far. Once I knew I was allowed to go far, because a lot of TV shows you were not allowed to, and I'm the kind of actor, put me on a stage and I go all the way, and then I'll do the opposite at the very next moment. I always look for that. And you can't really do that in TV. Directors get afraid of that. And Frakes was not afraid of me doing anything, and so I was able to do that. Once that was established, I think the writers and the other directors, and they pulled me back. Cliff pulled me back at times, and that's cool too. I don't mind being directed at all. I've been a director on stage most of my life, and a stage director, and so I get that. And but it was really to make Gowron fun, interesting, and stay within the character and stay within in the through line of what he wanted for the Empire and himself. But they gave me some great lines to work with. I mean, just fabulous.
Another one, you said, now you must live in your decision, with your decision, like a Klingon. What you tell to Worf,
Yeah.
when he tries to say, hey, I wasn't the one, it wasn't me. He's like,
you made the choice.
That's the choice you made. So,
yeah. So
I'm giving
thank you.
No pity. Yeah, exactly. Really love this. It made me feel like this kind of episode is where you get Game of Thrones from. If I'm, this is the Game of Thrones, gamesmanship, politics, backstabbing, positioning for power. This is exactly where. Yeah. But I can completely extrapolate the entire Game of Thrones out of an episode like this.
Well, it was such a great episode. I mean, it really was. It was.
Yeah.
I was in heaven doing it, and then just a little anecdote. It was funny walking off a set and then saying hi to somebody, and they don't know who the hell you were, and you were.
You know what else makes this thing work? To Ronald D. Moore's credit is the stakes are high. Sometimes you get episodes where it's inconsequential, or you don't really feel an imminent threat. But this is high stakes. This is like peace and war is hanging in the balance. This is this all has to be played out in a political gamesmanship. But Picard at one moment says, "Hey, let's get the hell out of here. I don't want to even get involved." So I mean, just all of those things are the perfect notes hit. And also, there's an element of war that's attractive as far as the storylines in Star Trek as well. There's something there where either war is on the brink, or war is happening, or trying to prevent a war. But the idea of that is always one of the big Star Trek themes that is engaging for me as an audience.
Yeah, you're right. The high stakes of the whole show was monumental. And then bringing it back to other characters, and treachery, and I mean, what it was. It was very Shakespearean. It was, a lot of time. I did Edmund in King Lear just before I did Gowron, and I brought a lot of Edmund into Gowron, and it was just that show just epitomized not only the culture of the Klingons, but how we worked as a culture, how we think, how we dealt with others, how we thought about other people, of the universe. That we had a lot of disdain for humans, and actually this show actually made us respect humans a lot more,
Mm-hmm.
We saw in them a warrior. They could be a warrior nation like we were, and that caused respect. Where the Romulans, we were just, there is the trash of the universe,
Yeah.
And I want to also add to one thing that your character does for Worf, and specifically in this episode. There was a moment there where Worf goes onto your ship, and he's now in command of the, defenses. And you suggest, fire the weapons. And Worf says, I wouldn't do that. I think we should do it like this. Wait till their shields are down. I can fire manually. And there was a pause, a contemplation. I can see all of that in your face. It registered in how you put faith and trust in Worf in that moment, where you didn't just dismiss him and use your authority over him. You contemplated the suggestion. You contemplated his motives. You considered his background and experience, all in like such a small moment.
Mm-hmm.
But I felt all of that conveyed in that scene. And it does very well to lift up the main characters, which I think, great guest star does. Enhances also the main characters that are featured all the time. So I think you did that for Worf in this episode as well.
Thank you. Yeah. It was fun working with Michael. Always fun working with Michael.
Yeah.
Well, Robert, this has been so much fun. Man, oh man, do we appreciate you and your work and you being so gracious with your time and joining us today. And the fact that you're wearing a freaking Klingon hat. That is cool as hell right now, honestly.
Yes, it is.
But Robert O'Reilly.
And in Australia made this for me. An elderly lady, she stitched it by hand, and it was like, and I got it when I went to Australia. So I only wear it at special occasions.
That is a warrior's gift, to be sure. There is no way around that. Well, Robert O'Reilly, thank you very much. We really appreciate you, man. Right. And everybody at home, stick around because we've got a little bit more on this episode. We're going to heap more praise on Robert behind his back in just a moment. We'll be right back on The Seventh Rule. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to The Seventh Rule with Cirroc the Game Changer Lofton.
Hello.
Here are the trivioids of the week, and they are some good ones. Captain Picard walks in on Worf practicing his Batleth skills. The Enterprise has an unscheduled escort. The Duras sisters have secured the loyalty of at least 3 Starfleet commanders. Sorry, that's fleet commanders, not Starfleet. Fear is power. Guinan is willing to come down to level 14 for Worf. Guinan has heard Klingon belly laughs that will curl your hair. Kurn must go to the Mempa sector. Captain Picard enjoys a sip of Earl Grey tea with some Klingons. The Duras family is gathering a large force near Beta Thorador, and Worf will serve aboard the Bortus as tactical officer. Okay, real quick. The belly laughs. This was a scene that impacted me when I first saw this 25, 30 years ago as a kid. And it was because it gave me the realization that, yes, in fact, Worf is not a typical Klingon. We're always automatically thinking, oh, he's the one Klingon on the ship. So he's the Klingon representative. So this is what Klingons act like. But the more Klingons we see, whether it was Kalar, who birthed his son, right? She had the smirk. She was kind of horny. He bit her wrist. Whether it's Gowron, who acts a little goofy, whether it's the guys getting drunk. Suddenly you start realizing, wait a minute, Worf is not a representative of the Klingons. He's his own person. He's a great character, but she's right. He's an outsider among Federation people, but he's also an outsider among his own people. And that made him a much more interesting character. And it was that scene in that moment that I remembered way back when I I kind of had like a right turn feeling on Worf's, tragic character.
Well, the thing about it is, I feel like most of the Klingons we see are extroverts.
Yeah.
And they're loud and they're big and they want attention, and
You're so right.
they're extroverts, and he is an introvert. He internalizes things. He walks around with a chip on his shoulder, and
He pouts. He pouts. He gets his feelings hurt. He fusses. Yeah.
Yeah, he doesn't call things out directly for what it is, and put his foot down like a Klingon normally does. Right? This is how it's going to be. I'm in charge, and that's what are you going to do about it? He's more. He takes more of a deliberate approach. He's more introverted. He's more conscientious, self-conscious of about his behavior. So I think because he's been judged his whole life, and always teased. He mentioned being teased when he was growing up and whatnot. I think that caused him to be self-conscious, not to be as sure of himself,
and more guarded. I mean? Yeah, absolutely.
Guarded.
I think you're absolutely onto something here.
Yeah. So that's what I see about him. I see somebody who's a little bit unsure, who needs a little motivation, where Picard is that crutch for him in instances where he's like, it's okay, Worf. Like, it's okay that you think this way, that you feel these feelings. I think Picard, in one scene in this episode where Worf says permission to take an extended leave or to take a leave of absence, Picard looked at him like, it's okay, Worf, that you want to ally with your people and that you have these feelings of passion for your cultural roots and whatnot. So Picard was the guy who was giving him that affirmation that he needed, that it's okay to feel how you feel and be how you are. But yeah, I think Worf is an introverted person who has suffered at the hands of a lot of teasing. So he has caused him to internalize his feelings and not be as robust and outspoken and, loud as typical Klingons are.
I think you would have made a great Guinan. Let me tell you, Cirroc. I think you're spot on right there. So, yeah, and this is one of the things that makes Worf such a beloved character. It also makes us want to tease him sometimes in those comedic episodes where we go like, oh, that's Worf, or oh, silly Worf, all fussy, or everybody tells him no, because he brings it upon himself a little bit, but it also makes him a very pitiable and likable character, because we see that struggle and we understand that struggle, and we've all been in that struggle in one way or another, but for him it's to such an extreme degree. So this is clearly it's a Worf episode, but it's also a Picard episode, and this is one of those really, Ronald D. Moore does a writing clinic on this. It's one of these really good episodes that shows difficult decisions. There are no right answers. Like, we're all rooting for Picard to say, we're going to go in and defend Worf and Gowron. Federation be damned, And Sisko might have. Kirk might have. Janeway might have. But Picard, also Archer, they're more the diplomats. They're more about honor, duty, loyalty in their own way. And we're kind of surprised when Picard says, no, my name's Paul, and this is between y'all. We're going to go ahead and back our ship away. We're like, what? I even put in my notes, Eve England going to be pissed, man. When she sees it, she'd be like, what a wanker. What a wanker, Picard. You're such a wanker. But, it's one of these damned if you do, damned if you don't kind of episodes,
Yeah, and that goes back to that meme that you sent me a while ago where, they have Picard next to Sisko, and it's like Picard is the captain you want to prevent a war, and Sisko is the captain you want to win a war.
Mm-hmm. And Kirk is the one you want to fuck a war. I don't know.
Yeah, but the thing is, this rings true to that meme essentially, because Picard is doing whatever he can to prevent a war, even if that means essentially sacrificing Worf, in which case he was willing to do in this particular moment. He was willing to say, "Hey, Worf made his own bed. He can lie in it. He's a grown up. He decided that's what he wants to do, but we're not going to jeopardize Starfleet over one man's decision." So I think, that's where we see Picard's diplomacy. I was a little more shocked about him really throwing a fit about Worf kind of going back into the Starfleet catalog or logs to find what happened during the, whatever was classified between that war
the
that
Ascension
he was in.
and all that. Yeah,
the Kittimer massacre that Worf was trying to do some research on inside of the Starfleet database, and Picard was upset about that, and then he made the decision, well, I'll just release it to everybody so it'll be available for anybody who wants to see it.
Right, because otherwise it looks like the Federation is involving themselves in the internal affairs of Klingons, which is not anything that they can do. And, that's a lot more nuanced. That's a lot more like political intrigue. And I did like the one line that Picard said. I don't remember if it was right then, but he says, "That is beyond my purview." I was like, ooh, I want it. Next time, I don't want to do something like somebody says, "Hey, Ryan, can you get me a glass of water?" We're like, that is beyond my purview. I am so sorry. I am so sorry.
Yeah. That was clever. And then Riker's face, sometimes we're like, just like watching him go back and forth, like the scene where
we are Riker.
Riker's like,
he's like, ooh,
really? Oh,
are you gonna let him talk to you
res-
like that? Yeah.
Yeah.
Or at the end when it was when Worf was walking away with Gowron, it was like Worf and Gowron and Picard and Riker. And then Riker's got this stance, like right next, really leaning in on Picard, like, yeah, I'm with him. You mess with him, you mess with me. Like it was adorable.
Yeah.
It was the best shot.
Yeah, you made your choice. So yeah, there was some good stuff in this episode. I mean, this thing was laid out as well as it can be. Ronald Moore, this is one of his, better episodes, if not, up there on the top, because I thought this had the element of intrigue. It had the deception. The Romulans and the Klingons are involved. The Klingon Civil War is happening. The Duras sisters are phenomenal characters that just they kind of have the air of fear when you see them. You feel intimidated. You feel
they're great villain characters.
They're great villains.
Didn't this feel like a hint of a Deep Space Nine episode? Right? It felt like the hint of like Deep Space Nine season 4, season 5 kind of thing, where there are all these factions, all these empires put into play, and it's all kind of hinging on a few people and a few chess pieces. And I was like, and Ronald D. Moore, no surprise, is the guy that wrote this, because you could definitely trace that Deep Space Nine flavor back to Ronald D. Moore in this instance. I didn't notice that before, but watching it this time, I said, wow, this is like a hint of what's to come in Deep Space Nine.
And another theme that is Star Trek related, when you think about the history of their storylines, they really do courtroom dramas like no other science fiction show. And this essentially is a Klingon courtroom or Klingon high court drama, right? So this is a kind of a Klingon high court drama, which we've seen other episodes in Deep Space Nine, for example, when Quark had a run-in with the Duras sisters, wasn't it? Wasn't that a High Council episode where Quark was trying to?
Yeah, why can't I remember what that episode was called? Everybody in the comments below, tell us what that episode was called, where he went and he was like fighting with the Batlet too, and he was
pretending to be married. Yeah, that episode, and another great episode because it deals with Klingon culture, it deals with the High Council, it talks about their rituals, their customs.
House of Quark was the episode.
House of Quark. Yes.
Grilka was the
Grilka. Yes, yes. Another great Klingon episode. This to me just checks the boxes for Star Trek as far as science fiction is concerned, as far as great storytelling is concerned, as far as high stakes are concerned, diplomacy. I like the political gamesmanship. I like the conflict of interest that Captain Picard is in, where he is finding himself, conflicted, essentially having to hand the reins to maybe potentially the Duras sisters in his role as arbiter of the succession. So all of these things played into a really great story that was weaved in well to me. Love Tony Todd, by the way, as well.
Two very quick things. One is I also put in my notes the same thing you did, which was this was Game of Thrones before Game of Thrones. This is Game of Thrones Star Trek style. And secondly, because we only got a second before we got to talk about a couple other things. Denise Crosby pops in at the end.
I was like,
we haven't even gotten to that because this episode is so juicy that Denise Crosby pops up as a Romulan, right? Well, how did you react to that moment?
Well, I think they showed this character in the dark, in the shadows before that. So I was already guessing, like, oh, that's definitely a Romulan. That's my guess. I was like, they're answering to the Romulans. We know that Duras has a history of siding with the Romulans, and I'm sure that their revolt is being, somehow backdoor sponsored by the Romulans, and this was some kind of covert Romulan operation. And so that was my wheel spinning already from seeing this shadowy figure. By the way, again, shout out to Cliff Bull. I thought he did a great job in this episode as far as directing was concerned. The shadows were great. The way the set was filmed was awesome. The use of the Klingon, High Council space was very well done. Mm-hmm. I just thought he did a great job as far as directing in this episode. So I want to make sure I said that. But yeah, I couldn't believe I saw Denise Crosby. I was like, oh, what a cliffhanger! Like
this is crazy. And then people would have to wait 4 months or 3 months. That's so rude. Well, nowadays we got to wait 50 weeks, right? We have to wait like 40 weeks at least. We got to wait, 9 months. But also the exterior shots of the Klingon ship, the VFX remastering, gorgeous. Yeah. Oh my God, those were gorgeous. Yes. But hey, we're almost out of time. So who gets the home run of today's episode, in your opinion, Cirroc Lofton?
Oh. I'm going to give, it's hard to say because there's so many great performances in this episode. I'm going to give the home run to Ronald Moore for the writing in this episode. Just unbelievably good. Just one thing after another. Like I said, I couldn't peel myself away from this episode. Ron Moore kept the dialogue great. I was writing down his lines. Klingons do not laugh. Just really good stuff. And then on screen, the home run would be to Bob O'Reilly and the Galron. I thought he just carried this episode exceptionally well. The moment where Worf is announcing that he's going to go with Galron's sitting over his shoulder, looking at him like, keep going. Tell him more.
Yeah.
You're with me now. So I love that. So I'm going to say Bob O'Reilly on-screen home run today.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally agree. I mean, look, for me, Ronald D. Moore hits the home run very clearly. Amazing writing. It's beautiful. We can see the lineage of Deep Space Nine, and the entire Klingon Empire is expanding because of his pen, or proverbial pen. Here are some other people that get grand slams every single time. Homer Frizzell, Dr. Anne-Marie Siegel, Eve England out in Wales, Yvette Blackman Tom, TJ Jackson Bay out in Missouri, Titus Moeller, Dr. Mohammed Noor, Tierney C. Diekman, Anil O. Palat, Joe Balsarati, Mike Gu, Dr. Stephanie Baker, Carrie Schwent, Faith Howell, Edward Foltz, My Live from Tokyo, The Matt Boardman, Chris McGee, Justin Weir, Jake Barrett, Henry Unger, Allison Leach Hyde, Julie Manasfi, Jed Thompson, Dr. Susan V. Gruner, Glenn Iverson, Dave Gregory, Tim Baum, Chris Sternett, Greg K. Wickstrom, and of course, the incomparable Jason Okun and Chris Garis. Stick around. Some of those aforementioned names will be on the other side in the free-for-all. We'll be right back on The Seventh Rule. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to The Seventh Rule with Cirroc Lofton. Of course, Malissa Longo is here for the free-for-all as well. Jason M. Okun is here. Allison Leach Hyde is dreaming of the Packers. Grandpa One is here. He's thinking of the Blackhawks. Carrie Schwent has her cool Ferengi shirt. I love the Romulan thing with the Klingon added in the background. And Chris McGee has his Guns N' Roses style Seventh Rule shirt with Denise Crosby at the top. All right. Jake Sisko guesses the IMDb score.
Ooh. I'm going to say this was an 8.7.
8.7. Do I hear 8.8? Does anybody have any guesses that doesn't already know?
Go with 8.1. Oh, there you go, Jason.
That's it.
Did you guys both say 8.1?
Yeah.
The answer is, of course, the average between Cirroc and Jason and Chris's answer, which is an 8.4. Now, I know there's some math nerds out there saying, well, technically, if you average all three together, it would be an 8.3. What I meant was their answer and his answer, not each of their answers. So don't try to math on me. Okay, what about non-appearance mentions? I heard a few of those. I got, here's what I got. Check my work. I got Duras, the original Duras, got Alexander, and for both Rozhenko parents. Were there any others?
Would you actually count the Rozhenko parents?
Yeah, because we've seen them. But we haven't seen
them,
Worf's
but
actual
he said,
parents.
I was rescued from Khitomer by humans, raised and loved by human parents. So does that mean he's directly referencing his parents? Okay.
Yeah, we'll take it.
What about
the Homer
appearance?
test.
What about appearance non-mentions?
Like
We
Beverly
have,
and Troy?
And Jordy.
Yeah.
And Jordy.
Yeah.
Lieutenant J.
Well, we see them in the transporter room at the end.
Exactly.
Tasha Yar would also be on that list.
There are no lines. They just appear almost as just walk on screen.
I did think
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
that Troy and Beverly I thought it was just going to be their stand-ins, because when he first walks in, we just see their backs. And I was like, are they not even going to be in this at all? And then it finally shows their front at the end, you know. Do we have some kinds of or some sorts of Chris McGee?
No, not in this episode.
All right. Well, then, Malissa Longo, please get us started off on the right track by telling us what you thought of this episode. Cool shirt.
Oh, thank you. Thanks. I was going to actually say, I love your sweater, Allison. I keep looking at it, and it looks so cozy. Anyway, I enjoyed this episode, and I think it deserves a high rating on IMDb for several reasons, but I think I'm going to focus on Worf today. And the fact that he is probably one of my favorite characters in all of Star Trek, because he is so well-rounded. He's not perfect by any means. He makes mistakes. He makes wrong choices. He does all of these things, but he always does it with the motivation of honor. And whether or not he succeeds in that, he always tries to live his life honorably. And he doesn't pretend to be somebody he's not. And I think that this episode it has highlighted for me several things that Worf has struggled with throughout the series, throughout Deep Space Nine, from the beginning. And that's something that Picard said, in that he lives in two worlds. He is part of two worlds. And he is constantly trying to find his Klingonness because he's not confident in that. He's not confident in being a Klingon, which makes me think this is probably why he's not a great parent to Alexander as well, is because he's not confident in who he is. So he can't be a competent role model to his child because he doesn't know what to teach him. So there's so many things. And the chat is always so funny. So if I start giggling for random reasons, that's why. The chat is hilarious. But yes, so I love Worf, and I like the Klingon boob window because I think it's funny, and I thought it was wonderful that we got a little surprise from, is it Tasha Yar in Romulan haircut? What? Why? Why is this possible? How is this possible? I guess we have to wait and find out for season 5. You're muted.
Love it. I love how Melissa played dumb the same way I did when I was talking to her. I was like, what was she doing there? What a surprise.
Tasha Yar there.
I guess we'll just have to wait and find out. Thanks very much, Malissa Longo. Yeah. Thoughtful, hilarious, as always. Jason M. Okun is here. Also thoughtful. What have you got for us?
Maybe not as thoughtful. I've always liked this one. I mean, to me, this episode is about two things. It's Ron Moore's writing and the performances of the actors. I think, I'll get it out of the way quickly. Visually, the most exciting thing is camera pointing up at Klingons. But but the entire episode really holds together by, Ron Moore's writing and certainly the performances. I think this is the most Deep Space Nine-like episode we will see. For obvious reasons. It's certainly the most Michael Dorn has had to do, through the entire run of Next Gen. And he's very good in it. Patrick Stewart's very good in it. It's just, there's so much jump-packed into these 42 minutes, kind of reminiscent of what happened with Sins of the Father. It almost looks like it should be longer than, more than one episode, kind of jump-packed into all of this. It kind of keeps you on the edge of your seat. There's a lot of talking and whatnot, but at least, there's something happening at all times. And the fact that you have character development, you have sort of story moving forward, there's sort of this interconnected world, if you will, that's weaved together. That's what makes us watch this. And obviously, the surprise was built into this episode, I guess, before high definition came into place, where we could actually see things in the shadow before the end. But at least it was, certainly surprising at the time. And, the fact that they got Whoopi for a cameo appearance again, very, very poignant and it's a wonderful scene. It tells us a little bit about her, and she sort of cracks open sort of this nutshell of Worf that we see from the beginning and we'll continue to see, I guess, through the run of the series and Deep Space afterwards. There's certainly a lot more to say, but again, it's an enjoyable show to watch. And, obviously we have to wait for part 2.
Great stuff. Thank you very much, Jason M. Okun. Allison Leach Hyde is here showing off the coolest sweater west of the Mississippi. What do you think of this one?
I've always liked this episode. It's very Shakespearean-esque. It's a lot of talking, a lot of little storylines that are like all coming together. So it's super Shakespeare-y, and I love that. So I've always enjoyed this one. And whenever we get Klingons and new Klingons and more Klingons, it's always great. Like, I get so excited watching the beginning of the episode when all of our favorite Klingon guest star names pop up on the screen before we see them. I'm like, yes, 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 I get them all. Yay. So I love that. And I had the hardest time taking notes in this episode because I was just watching. So yeah, I'm just like, yeah, this is great. I'm gonna go for my favorite Picard line was lies must be challenged. Like right in the beginning. I love that line. I really think that Picard, Patrick Stewart, did a great job with this episode. I thought he did everything well, from the little comedic bits of when, Bator is rubbing his head and trying to be super sexy at him, pouring his tea. Being very sexy while pouring tea. I mean, who ever thought you could be sexy while pouring Earl Grey tea? But she's doing it. And, him trying to go this is a lot, and, keeping his cool. And that final scene between him and Worf, when he's like, are you sure this is what you want to do? I'm not going to come in as your captain. I'm coming in as your friend. And are you sure this is what you're going to do? Okay, here we've got, the wonderful scene of him exiting with, the crew there in support of him as who he is. So love that. And I think Whoopi just shooting from the hip, not aiming, it just was the funniest bit the whole time. And Worf just getting all upset. How are you doing this? She's like, because I'm cool, calm, and collected, and you are in turmoil, internal right now. So yeah, of course I'm going to beat you. I'll come down to your level. It'll be great. So that's my favorite bit. Little sad that we didn't get more than visual on Geordi, Troy, and Crusher, because I'm sure they could have been there for Worf as well. And yeah, this was truly the Worf and Picard show, and I think they both did a fabulous job.
Mm-hmm. Just like you did, Allison Leach Hyde out in New Mexico. Grandpa One is here. I bet he's seen New Mexico in the past one time or two. What do you think about this episode?
It's kind of reminiscent, because when this episode was on, I was dating my girlfriend, now my wife. We used to watch this all the time. And this, I don't want to rehash anything else, but when, Worf resigned his commission, he was leaving the ship as a civilian, but they still did the guard of honor as he was leaving. And technically, he didn't have to ask permission to leave the ship. He was no longer part of Starfleet. So that's one of the things that that stuck out to me. And this episode also starts the background story of Worf period that travels through Deep Space Nine, as far as the interconflict and the Klingons. But yeah, that's the one thing that stuck out watching this again, was the guard of honor as he walked down the hall.
Beautiful scene. Thank you very much, Grandpa One, aka Tim Baum. All right, Carrie Schwent, aka Crafty Bear. Cool background, cool shirt, cool everything. What do you got for us?
Yeah, I love Klingon episodes. They are absolutely so much fun. And got the Romulan, so I have to have my standard Romulan background. But with so many Klingons, I had to include them a little bit, and of course the Ferengi guys, because my favorite guy Klingon. No offense, Worf, but I just have a soft spot for Gowron and those giant bulging eyes of his. He is just so much fun. He just every second he's on screen, it just makes you smile. Especially when he's throwing shade at the kid that walks in and talking all big. But we get Lursa and B'Etor, and I discovered watching this episode again that I definitely have a thing for the lady Klingons. I love how universally badass they are. You got Lursa and B'Etor. You got Kalar, you got B'Elanna, and Laurel. So many awesome Klingon ladies. These two, Lursa and B'Etor, they just absolutely steal every scene that they're in. And I love how confident they are. Just absolutely just exude confidence, even when they're when they're messing with Picard. That's all of that. And I looked up on their IMDb, and I realized that I've seen the actress that played B'Etor in a couple of things out of Klingon makeup, including in a fantastic episode of Star Trek Voyager called Random Thoughts, which is B'Elanna features very, very, very heavily in. Highly recommend that episode. It's very, very good. And apparently she's also on a Netflix show called Virgin River, which I keep meaning to watch but haven't started yet. She's in quite a few episodes of that. Her and the actor that played Toril are both still regular working actors. Sadly, we lost the actress that played Lursa back in, I think, 2019. But I love her deep voice. Love her deep voice. And of course, speaking of badass women, Denise looks fantastic in the Romulan outfit. The haircut just works for her, I think. And when I reading over the episode on Memory Alpha, when she's talking in the shadows, it describes her speaking as speaking with a cool, deep voice. And I love that description of her voice because it's perfect. I've got a couple things that I noticed that I'm going to say for things left unsaid. One includes a picture, but before I have the limerick, I found out that Ronald Reagan visited the set while they were filming this episode, and apparently he really liked the Klingons, loved their look, and I guess Gene Roddenberry was also visiting then, and he at one point dropped his cane, and Reagan picked it up and gave it back to him, which I think was so sweet. Absolutely adorable. But in thinking about it, took me a little bit longer than usually to come up with the limerick for the episode. But then I thought about Picard and just him talking about the Prime Directive. That just sort of sparked what I ended up coming up with. So we've got, now there it is. It seems that the Prime Directive is clear. It's the principle that we hold most dear. Though at times we don't like it, and it's hard to stay silent. We will break it if we give in to fear. And to quote one of my favorite lady Klingons that I met on the Star Trek cruise, Kapla, y'all.
Sounds like
walking down the hallway one day.
Was it Mary Chifo?
Mary Chifo, yep.
Yeah.
Got it.
Kapla, y'all.
Kapla, y'all.
All right. Thank you so much, Carrie Schwent, aka Crafty Bear. All right, Dark Lord Chris McGee, what have you got for us, sir? What do you think of this one?
Well, first, since TJ isn't here today, someone needs to wear the proper headgear. So
there you go.
There we go. This is a fantastic ending to a fantastic season of The Next Generation. And as if Worf's surprise resignation wasn't enough, that cliffhanger ending, well, that had people in WTF mode all summer long. We get return visits from our favorite recurring characters, of course, Robert O'Reilly as Gowron, Tony Todd as Kern, and we're introduced to new recurring characters, such as finally getting our introduction to the Duras sisters, whose names and cleavage every Star Trek fan knows by heart. And the surprise reveal at the end, played by Denise Crosby, who, as has been mentioned before, voiced the Romulan in the shadows while Geordi was getting his brainwashed in the mind's eye just a couple of episodes ago. We get to see Enterprise's phaser range for the second and last time. First time was in the second season episode, A Matter of Honor. And I love that Guinan beats Worf handily. Again, we really needed to see Guinan kick some Borg butt in Star Trek First Contact. On a slightly sadder note, seeing Worf and Kern together in this episode and the next, spoiler, really makes their final scenes together on Deep Space Nine later on that much more heartbreaking. And it was delightful to see Ensigns Jay and Kellogg standing in the honor guard to see Worf off the ship at the end. I've got a couple more thoughts I'll save for things left unsaid. And the memorable quote for this episode is, of course, from Guinan. I've heard Klingon belly laughs that will curl your hair.
Yep. That's a good one. Thank you very much, Chris McGee. Oh, also, Chris Garis is here out in Texas, but I don't think he's allowed to pop in because he's working. But he put down a few notes for us. He says, this is one of the great ones. At first, I was a little surprised that Picard advocates for Worf to push to regain his honor. This feels slightly out of place, given Picard's usual stance of non-interference. However, I completely understand why he does it. He respects Worf and wants him to reclaim what was unfairly taken from him. When Worf confronts Gowron about restoring his honor, Gowron has to refuse because of the power the Duras family still wields. As suspected, the Romulans are involved, which ignites the Klingon Civil War. Picard is torn between adhering to his oath of non-interference as a Starfleet officer and aiding the Klingons. Meanwhile, Worf is conflicted about choosing between his duty as a Starfleet officer and embracing what it truly means to be a Klingon. In the end, Worf decides to side with Gowron and fully embrace his Klingon heritage. I loved the moment when Picard and the crew give Worf an honor guard farewell. It's such a touching scene. It almost brings a tear to your eye. But of course, that wouldn't be very Klingon. All right. Jake's final take. Cirroc Lofton, any final thoughts on this episode?
Yeah. Thanks for that, Carrie. I had to look up some of those pictures of Ronald Reagan on the set. I didn't realize that had happened. That's pretty interesting. I thought of a few things while I was watching this episode. One thing that jumped out to me was when Worf was saying goodbye and leaving the ship. Everybody was gathered around. I realized to myself that I don't really think Worf has a best friend, because it would have been a best friend moment there. That was the moment for the best friend to say, hey buddy, hope you come back, stay safe, whatever. But it felt like it was a little bit cold for just everybody to kind of stand there and watch him without, I feel like somebody giving him a hug or the friendship handshake kind of moment. So I don't think Worf has a best friend. The other thing is Tony Todd. Seeing him was really brought up a lot of emotions, but I also feel like he's one of the best Klingons there's ever been when it comes to the way his voice is, his stature, and the way he projects himself. It's literally, it's very remarkable. He's perfectly tailor-made to play this Klingon current character because he's so believable at it. And I thought his hair looked great. I don't know what shampoo he uses, but he's using some good Klingon shampoo, whatever he's getting that stuff. The other thing that I saw was a Randy sighting. Melissa has the picture right behind you, but I did see Randy right there to the...
him?
Yeah, that's him right there.
Randy James, good eye. Yeah.
Yeah, he was there for the lineup, so I did see Randy, and always give a shout out to him when I can. Worf's integrity was on full display when he stood up and told his brother that they needed to respect and honor Gowron and the whole process. I thought he showed integrity throughout this episode, both with how he communicated what his feelings were with Picard and how he navigated his Klingon roots. Also showed his intelligence and strategy when he told Kern, we're going to wait for Gowron to be at his weakest, then we'll negotiate our family name restoration. I thought that showed Worf's brain power of strategy, and he's not just bumbling through life. He's actually thinking things out. He's strategizing. And another thing that showed was his intelligence when he came up with the clever way to attack the ship when the shields were down and manually shoot. That was another example of Worf's intelligence, which was not really highlighted that much. We always look at him as a brute character. We don't see somebody who has the capability of having intelligence, who has strategy. And I thought those things were on full display as well in this episode. When he resigned his commission as a Starfleet officer, I thought that was a really poignant moment of him laying down his comm badge on the desk. It had a lot of weight to that moment. It was like a very serious thing, and I felt the gravity of it when they had that close up on the comm badge and they pull up. It was a very big decision in Worf's personal life because we know how much he loves Starfleet. So that's how much of a sacrifice he's willing to make in this moment. And I thought it was emphasized well with the camera work. And then the last thing I'll say is I really enjoyed the way Picard handled the Duras sisters in that scene. I thought he had composure. I thought the lines were cleverly written when he says, "You wouldn't harm the arbiter before he makes a decision. That's not practical." And it was just well written in that type of way. And I also love the way he ended that scene where he says, "Yes, very well," something like manipulated with the skill of a Romulan.
Mm-hmm.
And so he kind of foreshadows that he feels there's Romulan emphasis somewhere in here. Mm-hmm. And I thought it was great. It was just great language. It was well written. It was eloquent because then the close up was on the Duras sister. Like, how in the hell does he know they're all Romulan connected, right? You could see all that just in the eyes. There was no words there, but that's what I saw. So I thought that was well played by Patrick Stewart. I thought he hit almost all of the notes, even when he said to, Riker was like, "Well, what about Worf? Like, are you just going to leave Worf?" And he kind of looks and he says, "Ensign, engage." Like that's the captain. Like, I'm making the move. I make the call. And this is it. And I thought he played that note well as well. So kudos to Patrick Stewart in this episode, as well as to Worf, as the main lead actors in this show, but also the guest stars just really hit home runs as well. So all around, very enjoyable episode. Definitely see where Game of Thrones gets its political gamemanship kind of storytelling comes from this kind of an episode. If you're a fan of Star Trek and you watch this, you can totally come up with a Game of Thrones. Just take these Klingons and just make it in the dragons and just change it around a little bit. It's the same storyline of political gamesmanship, of backstabbing, of power grabs. And that's what I really loved about this episode. So, yeah.
Well, speaking of Klingon roots, and Chris Garis also has this in our Zoom chat, but here's a fun one. You asked what kind of shampoo he uses, Cirroc. L'Oreal, because you're worth it.
I was going to say, when I was dating in the 80s, that's pretty much what every girl had.
So. Yeah, late 80s. Yeah. All right.
They killed the ozone layer.
Yeah, they did. All right. That's it for us on the free-for-all, everybody. Thank you to Grandpa One, Chris McGee, Carrie Schwint, Chris Garis, who's hanging out as well backstage, if you will, Allison Leach Hyde, Jason M. Okun, Malissa Longo, for myself, Cirroc, Melissa, and Aaron Eisenberg. Thank you all so much for hanging out with us. We really appreciate it, and we will see you next time. Until then, always remember the 7th rule. Always.